We make decisions emotionally. That's the way humans work. We make decisions emotionally, and then we will try and use logic to justify our decision. Sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better, too. Like the quality of the content on the internet is getting really bad. That'll probably trigger us to figure out how to make it better. And at some point, it'll probably be a lot better. Person, you might not realize that what you take advantage of when you see the world, there are incredibly complex things going on there. You're not just seeing the pixels in front of you and the colors and all of that. What you're seeing is a model of the world in your head.
You have a pretty impressive academic record, a perfect academic record at MIT in mechanical engineering in both bachelor's and a master's. Could you walk us through a little bit about why you chose mechanical engineering and what that education was like?
Yeah, actually, it's a kind of an interesting story. I did not actually plan on going to college right away when I graduated high school. And my father said, son, maybe you should apply to, at least one school. I was not really into the whole college idea, I guess. But I was over at my friend's house and he was looking through college brochures and he said, oh, look at this school, MIT. Supposedly it's the best engineering school in the world, but you could never get in there. I had promised my dad that I'd look into schools to apply to. And a couple weeks later, he asked me and I hadn't done anything, of course. And so then I just remembered my friends saying MIT. So when my dad asked me, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to apply to MIT. I had no idea. I ended up applying to MIT. That was the only school I applied to. And I was very fortunate that I got accepted. And I started out actually, like many people do, in computer science there. But at the time, at least, the computer science department was very focused on microprocessor design and compiler design, neither of which I found very interesting. Those are kind of like tools. So I eventually switched over to mechanical engineering, sort of built my own robotics program. MIT, to my knowledge, still doesn't have an undergraduate robotics program, but I kind of just worked with my professor and I built my own robotics program that included mechanical, electrical, software. It was challenging and educational.
So, with your background and your education in robotics, and you said you essentially started your own robotics program there, how did that then lead on to, or what was the journey after that to start the many companies that you've started? I think we've got Vecna, Mass Robotics, Mechable. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, Mechable. Mechable stands for mechanizable.
So, what tied all of those together, and how did you get started on your business journey?
During my graduate work at the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at MIT, I came across this really cool new programming language at the time called Java. Nobody had heard of Java. There were some things that I really liked about it, so I kind of leaned in on Java. And of course, Java eventually became a major enterprise programming language. And I enjoyed it so much, actually, that when I was graduating, I was looking for a job that allowed me to do Java. And I only found one company. The reason why is because I had written a robotic operating system purely in Java, this internet-based robotic operating system. In retrospect, I realized that I probably should have released that as open source and shared that, because once I finally finished my thesis, I was so happy to be done. It kind of just went on the shelf. But it took about a decade before something similar to what I had done actually came out. But anyway, I got this job with a company called W3 Health. We were doing healthcare software written in Java. And after about 6 months, I found that I was winning the business. This was a small company. So I was winning the business. I was doing all the programming. I was meeting with the customers. And I started to think, like, why am I an employee of this company when I'm sort of the one doing everything? And so I struck out on my own. I started doing work as an independent consultant. And then just, over time, I built a company called Vecna Technologies. And Vecna Technologies was very much sort of a lab. We were just doing lots of different research projects, lots of SBIRs, if you're familiar with the Small Business Innovation Research Programs. Did a lot of different projects. I actually won over 33 million, I think, research funding as principal investigator. Did a lot of different projects. Did a lot of projects with DARPA, NASA, Army, Air Force, Navy, NIH, NSF. Over time, a lot of these projects turned into, interesting products that we would then commercialize and eventually split. Well, while I was doing Vecna Technologies, I had this crazy idea of paying my employees to spend 10% of their work week doing community service. Interestingly, a lot of my mentors that I was working with at the time from MIT Sloan School and Harvard Business School recommended against, because they're like, it was mostly a services business at that point. So we were, basically writing software for large organizations, helping them with their automation needs. But this idea of paying your employees to spend 4 hours out of every 40-hour work week doing community service just seemed absolutely crazy to, some of the business people that were advising me. But to me, it felt like the right thing to do for a number of reasons. And one of the projects that I did, so most of the team, they're doing things like Habitat for Humanity, mentoring first robotics teams, working in soup kitchens, all those kind of things. I realized that the robotics industry was really in need of some help. There are very few, you could basically count them on one hand, successful, what I would call next generation robotics companies, not sort of the typical manufacturing line, record and playback robot arms that, just did the exact same motion again and again. But this idea of robots that actually perceived the environment and would make decisions based on that perception. So I, using my community service, worked with a group of co-founders to start an organization called Mass Robotics. And Mass Robotics has been a huge success. It's a nonprofit. It has a mission to really help move the robotics industry forward, to connect founders with companies that need the technology, to connect them with investors, to help mentor young people. Particularly, I'm proud of the work done in STEM with young women in the local school system. Head Start program. It's really exciting to see young women who would have never thought of being involved in robotics and technology just get really excited about it, and then ultimately, end up at MIT and choose careers in this field. I'm actually a very strong proponent of trying to bring more women into engineering, more women as founders of startups. So that's something that I'm very passionate about. Mass Robotics has been very successful. And then at some point after that, ended up splitting Vecna Technologies because we were doing a lot of different things. We were doing robotics, we were doing healthcare software, we were in lots of different areas. We ended up splitting that into 4 different companies. Vecna Medical, which my ex-wife still runs and is doing a lot in terms of the healthcare space. We did patient check-in kiosks, patient portals, internet technology for healthcare. And we split out Vecna Robotics. Vecna Robotics is a world leader in driverless forklifts. So autonomous forklifts, mostly used in warehouses, a lot of manufacturing as well. And then 2 other businesses, one Twisted Fields. So I'm actually here at the research farm in San Gregorio, beautiful San Gregorio, California right now, where Twisted Fields is all about trying to use technology to enable a new generation of healthy food to be grown locally. And then Rotate 8, which is about taking a lot of the robotic technology we've developed over the years and building largely solar-powered, energy-efficient robots that are very, very affordable. And then a number of other things. So Mechable is the consulting, automation consulting company that we use a lot. I spend a lot of my time just helping out the industry. In some sense, I've made my money already, and I just really enjoy helping others. So I spend a lot of time mentoring founders and startups. I do a lot of due diligence for VC firms, technical due diligence. VC firms have a really hard time making good investments, especially in the tech space. It's hard a lot of times for them to know what's real and what's smoke and mirrors. So I donate a lot of my time to help in that area because I believe that making good investments is good for the whole industry. And so Mechable is actually, when people start asking me for more help than I can justify doing for free, then that's the mechanism we use to provide that consulting. That's mostly it. I have a tree service business called Tree 41, but too many companies.
Speaking about investment and market timing, could you talk about the investors' like acceptance or skepticism around disruptive technologies like robotics?
Yeah, this is a real shame. My experience has been that most VCs, I've learned a lot over the past few years, and most VCs actually are not successful. They do not provide good returns to their investors. Most of the companies that they invest in end up failing. It's hard because a lot of people become VCs because being a VC is super cool, or they have friends that have a lot of money that want to invest it. If you think about it, you've got like all this wealth on the planet, and all of that wealth is looking for investment opportunities. And in some sense, there's not enough good investment opportunities for all that wealth. At least in the VC world, I think there's a lot of good alternatives. I think a lot of times people don't realize that VC has only existed for a handful of decades. It's in some sense, a very new concept. And we've sort of flooded the market in a sense. So problem is that a lot of times VCs are very focused on following the hype. So right now, you could probably tell me, what are VCs investing in? AI, and in the robotics space, humanoid robotics. And the two are closely related, AI and humanoids. Tons and tons and tons, billions and billions are going into AI and humanoids. And this has been basically just started a few months ago. Maybe sort of began at a year, and it's ramped up and somewhere near the peak, and it's going to start going the other direction, because what happens is there's absolutely no way that all these investments can pan out. And as a matter of fact, the valuations that are determined for these companies are generally just way, way, way too high. It's a huge bubble. And so the vast majority of investors will not ever see a return on their humanoid and AI investments. No one wants to miss out, but sort of as a result of that, there's not enough good investments. And there'll be a VC firm that has a thesis investment around AI or humanoid robotics or whatever it is. And they just honestly kind of get desperate for companies that say they fit the mold, and they've got to deploy that capital, right? Because if they don't deploy the capital, they're not going to get any returns. But sadly, what ends up happening is they actually end up losing most of the money a lot of times. One of the things I'm working on right now actually is trying to create a better model for that. We're trying to put together an approach to startups that significantly improves the rate of success. I'm actually giving a seminar at Mass Robotics. So Mass Robotics every year has 10 startups that get into their accelerator program. And I do a seminar on how to fund your startups. What happens is early on, a lot of founders make some really bad decisions. Generally it's about taking VC way too early. And you can get on this hamster wheel of needing to raise money and then needing to make your company sound more valuable than it is, and needing to raise money and making your company sound more valuable than it is, until it falls apart, is kind of generally what happens. And so I've been on this tact of really helping founders to understand that there are alternatives, and you should really wait to raise VC until you are ready. Doing it too early is basically like signing your death warrant. Most people don't realize when they hear the glitz and glamour on VC that 19 out of 20 VC-backed companies fail outright.
What might be some signals to show you that you might be too early to raise VC money?
Product market fit is the key, right? You need to have actually shown that you have got a business model that works. You don't have to do it at scale yet. You don't have to have a large number of customers, but you have to have shown that there is a real need. You have a unique and defensible solution that can provide a better ROI than is available in the market today. Some of the mistakes that founders often make is, they go to VC too early, like at the idea stage. It's kind of crazy. When I first started raising, there was maybe seed and then Series A and Series B, and now you've got pre-seed,
bridging rounds.
Yeah, exactly. They've like filled in like 10 rounds before you even get to Series A now. And first of all, what's left of your company by that point? You've basically got zero equity. A big problem, and I was going to say, like that 1 out of 20 that actually doesn't fail outright, very few of those are actually good exits for the founder. They may return money to the fund, And returning money, of course, doesn't necessarily mean that they return more money than was put in. But, there's a large portion of the time when the founder really would have been better off working for somebody else, when all is said and done, financially at least, probably emotionally too, because, being a founder is probably the most stressful job on the entire planet, which I'll just take a real quick tangent here. One of the biggest problems for startups is founder mental health. And people don't like talking about that because, right, founders need to be bulletproof. Founders need to be like, hard charging, 100-hour a week. People will say, can take anything. And founders are humans. And that strain of being stuck in the middle of this triangle, customers, employees, investors, and you're there on your own, it can be incredibly challenging. So my hypothesis is, and this has been, this hypothesis has been, I think, confirmed by numerous meetings with founders, is that founder mental health is probably the number one issue getting in the way of startup success. Number one issue. And that's because you end up a lot of times starting to behave out of fear, and fear is never a good way to make business decisions.
It's really interesting that you bring that up because you're right. It's not often spoken about in terms of the impact on founders. It's really interesting as well, the impact that it has, maybe not necessarily in the moment, but the knock-on effect. My uncle has a very successful business and has done for the last 40 years. And I asked him the last Christmas I saw him, was it worth it for all the effort you had to put in and everything that happened? And he said, if you ask my grandkids, they'd say yes. If you ask my kids, they'd say no. Which I thought was a really interesting way of looking at it, really impactful statement.
It takes a large toll. It really does. Sleepless nights, looking into the abyss.
And chewing glass.
Yeah, chewing glass. You've heard all the analogies. So, I feel like when it is purpose driven, if it's purely financial, right? If somebody is trying to be a founder because they want to make a lot of money, I'd say that's a hard sell for me. If you really want to solve a problem and you are passionate about solving that problem, then I'd say go for it. Depending on what your philosophy on life is, I'd say life is way too short. Money isn't going to make you happy. There's lots of research that shows that money doesn't make you happy. You get to sort of a upper middle class level of financial stability, and that's the place to actually think about, building the kind of life you want. People who just go for greed, I think there's tremendous evidence to say that they do not experience a superior quality of life. As a matter of fact, it's probably a lower quality of life at the end of the day.
Coming back to, you talked about VCs, what they struggle with in terms of where do they invest, especially in the AI and robotic space, lots of hype, lots of smoke and mirrors potentially. So both for VCs looking to invest into the right companies, as well as for SMBs that are looking to take on the right solutions, what would you say are some maybe tips that you have to help differentiate and see through the hype maybe?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, I'd say that one of the things that can really get in the way of VCs making good investments is ego. I have seen so many situations where it's just very clear that being right is the most important thing. One of the little, I think, just realizations that I had is that we make decisions emotionally. That's the way humans work. We make decisions emotionally, and then we will try and use logic to justify our decision, which we're really good at, right? I'll say, no, I chose this because of X, Y, and Z. And the fact of the matter is, it was an emotional decision. You liked the guy. You thought that this was going to make you famous, or this, and you just believed in it emotionally, and then you try and use logic and facts to support it. So realizing that can really be liberating because you have to let go of the emotion. You can't invest emotionally. You have to really look at the facts. That's really all about doing really good due diligence. And to do really good due diligence, you have to understand what you know and what you don't know. I hear a lot of people talk about AI, and I'm like, that person has no clue how AI works. We hear these things like artificial intelligence, and we think that there's actually some intelligence there. And there's zero intelligence there. I actually really hate the term artificial intelligence. I think it's a misnomer. I think it misleads the public into thinking a lot of fear, first of all. Artificial intelligence is just a new way to program, right? You're basically programming with data instead of programming with commands. And it's all statistical. The way a large language model works, I think most people don't realize, because it is just so amazing, the emergent property of what happens when you slurp down the entire internet and basically build statistical models of how words fit together. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's basically it. You get something like ChatGPT out. Well, at the end of the day, ChatGPT, if we're really being honest, is a party trick. It's a pretty big party trick. That doesn't mean that they're not valuable applications for it. But I think as we go through this excitement around this tool and trying to use it for every single business problem, what we're going to find is that a lot, if not most, of the business problems we try and solve with this tool are probably not going to be appropriately solved with it. There will be some that will be appropriately solved with it. And the successful investors are going to be the ones. If you feel compelled to invest in AI, I'm tending to hold off on that myself until it's more clear, who might be the winners and losers as this emerges. And I think there's going to be plenty of time to invest when that happens. But it's just too risky right now, because the vast majority of them will go out of business and will not provide any returns. But this process of sort of letting things naturally evolve and finding where this particular tool, this particular programming tool, is the most effective at providing business value. I use ChatGPT and AI type tools all the time in my research. And the fact of the matter is that it seems to me like at least 50% of the time there is some factual error in what I get. Again, that doesn't mean it's not useful, right? It can help me, but believing that it is correct is a mistake.
To play devil's advocate here, humans do that all the time, thinking that they're correct, like you mentioned with the emotional fallacy there. How would you define intelligence? You said that artificial intelligence is a misnomer. I'm assuming, and perhaps correct me if I'm assuming incorrectly, that we as humans are intelligent, air quotes. So what is the difference?
Yeah, it's really around reasoning. There are attempts to actually create models in computers that approximate reasoning. In these tools right now, there's very little reasoning that occurs. It's purely a mathematical, statistical, right? It's not like thinking through something. It's more like this word, and then my statistical model says that this word comes next, and my statistical model says that this word comes next. There's no understanding of the words involved, right? This idea of creatively putting ideas together and coming up with new combinations that make sense. It's that making sense piece, right? And that's why you hear about hallucinations all the time for AI. It's because it doesn't have to make sense. It's just the numbers. It's just the statistics of the English language in this case.
Sounds kind of like a con artist, like just making something that sounds good.
It does sound good, right? And that's the big risk. And that's one of the things that I feel like we need more education on, because people will ask ChatGPT a question. ChatGPT will give them an answer. The answer is verifiably false, but because it is presented with such certainty, right? ChatGPT doesn't say, I'm not sure, I'm not an expert in this, but this sounds good. What ChatGPT says is boom, 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 and it's wrong. And people don't know it's wrong, but they accept it as right because they don't know any better. They're asking ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is a super genius, right? So that's the risk. I actually believe there's going to be a whole economy that pops up around, I don't know what I'd call it, maybe anti-AI or the ability to actually show that things are correct.
Okay. Verification layer, blue seal.
Something, right? But something that's going to actually give us confidence that the information that we are being fed is trustworthy.
That's like peer review journals, right? It was supposed to be some layer of authentication or approval.
Yeah, it doesn't exist right now at large in the internet. And big part of the problem is we've got this issue where the internet's eating itself. And let me say what I explain that. My experience has been, it seems to me that the vast majority of text on the internet and more images and eventually videos are all Gen AI created. And what are they using to create it? They're using the content on the internet. And so we're sort of recycling this AI generated garbage, and it sort of gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And, there are approaches to try and mitigate that, but that's kind of where we are right now. It won't be like that forever, right? We're great at solving problems, and we're in this AI hype cycle where we want to use it for everything, and it's making it very easy to generate a whole bunch of content that sounds intelligent and lacks a lot of value other than it's a lot of content. And for a long time, it was all about social media and everything. It was all about who could create the most content. So now we've figured out how to create tremendous amounts of content very, very quickly, but it's all garbage.
It's interesting as well, coming back to your point about humans make decisions emotionally and we justify it with logic. We've always been quite gullible. And I think will continue to be, right? Because so now it's ChatGPT says so it must be true. It used to be Facebook says so it must be true. Google says so it must be true, and so on into the past. Do you think even with the best technology in the world, we will ever be able to escape the human side of this? That we believe a lot of the time what we want to believe, and not what is, whether it's peer reviewed or not. Do you think there's a way out?
Your question is deep. I think we'll get better at that. I think we kind of go through cycles as well. But at the end of the day, I think a big problem is that it's all about selling stuff, right? Our entire society seems to be around selling stuff, selling and buying. And I think as we start to think more about the kind of life that we want and the fact that just buying and selling stuff doesn't really provide that. And I see a lot more of this now. But yeah, I don't know. That's a fascinating question. It could just get worse. So many things are getting worse on the planet right now. And sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better too. Like the quality of the content on the internet is getting really bad. And that'll probably trigger us to figure out how to make it better. And at some point, it'll probably be a lot better. But, I would love to be able to trust the things I read. And honestly, I don't really know how to do that right now. I go on the internet and I look for information on health. And depending on who's trying to sell me something, I hear a completely different story about health and what I should be eating and how I should be exercising, how much I should be eating or shouldn't be eating. And the big part of the big problem is the echo chamber effect, right? If I already emotionally believe somebody because somebody that was, cool or I trusted said it, and now I'm looking for evidence to support it, I can find all the evidence in the world on the internet to support any position I want. And that's problematic, I think, because it just allows us to sort of fill that need to justify with logic or with facts and data the decisions that we're making anyway, which means we're making, excuse my French, bullshit decisions and feeling good about it for a while. And then we make some new bullshit decisions and feel good about it, get hyped about whatever. And it's also because we're always looking for the silver bullet, right? We're always looking for the one little magic ingredient.
Well, I think we're simultaneously trying to conserve energy while growing so that we have an advantage. And so it's kind of like this tension between being a lazy success. So we're kind of looking for how do we square that circle? I'd like to take a pivot slightly and ask you, what have you learned from providing free automation consulting that might surprise some SMB owners or entrepreneurs?
The first one is that humanoids are probably not the solution to your warehouse needs.
It sounds biased.
I built, I had Time Invention of the Year. I don't know what year it was for a humanoid robot like decades ago. So, I built one of the early humanoids. And so I kind of been there and done that. And one of the first things you realize is that we have other types of tools for a reason, right? I mean, you look at industry and most of the time it's not a human doing stuff with their hands. Usually you've got a forklift or you've got a truck or you've got a cart, you've got whatever. And so in many cases, if not most cases, we're going to continue to see using the right tool for the job being the right approach. Eventually, perhaps humanoids will get strong enough, right? One of the things people don't realize when they watch these videos of all these humanoids do amazing things is humanoids are generally very, very, very weak. They cannot move or lift very much at all. Most of the time when you see them carrying those totes around, those totes are empty. Probably if we're going to actually get really useful humanoids, it's probably actually going to have to be hydraulics is the reality. Hydraulics are a pain in the ass, but they're way, way stronger. And, or, you find those jobs where humanoids don't need to be strong. The other thing I guess I would say is that a lot of times people will want to bring in automation. Their boss or the board will say, hey, you need to automate, go get robots or whatever. That's rarely the first thing that you should do, in my opinion. More often than not, I found that really optimizing your operations and figuring out how to think about the entire system as one holistic thing, rather than trying to bring in a robot to do this one part that a human used to do in the same way. Right? I see this again and again where we've got this sort of human dominated process where we've been doing it this way for years, and they'll try and just bring in some automation to just do one piece of that. And that's usually a lost opportunity. What you really want to do is rethink your entire process in the context of automation, or what I would sometimes call orchestration. Like how do you orchestrate this entire process to be more efficient? And mostly that's about information. So when you can actually better utilize your human workers, help them to be in the right place at the right time, doing the right job, you can generally 2x, 3x, sometimes even 4x the productivity of your enterprise just by making better use of the resources you already have through better planning, through better tracking, better information sharing. And then you'll find that there are opportunities to bring in pieces of automation at the right place at the right time that can really help that as well. But the other thing is that lights out automation, which was a big topic about a decade ago. Everybody the mistake everyone makes is they always try and jump, rather than taking the baby steps we need to take. And so there was a lot of talk around just get rid of all the humans. Let's just build the entire warehouse or factory completely with robots, right? And Elon Musk tried to do this with the Model S. He admitted it was a big failure. I can't remember what the quote was exactly. Humans are underrated. Humans are underrated until you've actually tried to build a robot, not necessarily even a humanoid robot, but just a robot, does some things that humans do. It's really easy to underappreciate what an amazing machine a human is. It's absolutely amazing. Like even just basic sight. As a non-mathematician, non-machine vision person, you might not realize that, what you take advantage of when you see the world, there are incredibly complex things going on there. You're not just seeing the pixels in front of you and the colors and all of that. There are so many layers of processing, and what you're seeing is a model of the world in your head. Like it's disconnected from your eyes. We feel like we're seeing through our eyes, and our eyes are a sensor that brings in data. What we're actually experiencing in our brain is this very complex, very rich model of the world where we take some visual information, we process it and we process it and we process it, and we do edge detection and blob detection, and we do object detection, object recognition, and all these models for how different objects, and we take all of that, and that's actually what we see. The ability to recreate that in a robot, in a machine vision system, we're actually not really that close to coming to anywhere near human levels yet. We've got so far to go. even just in understanding it. So, a lot of the times when there's hype about, super intelligence are going to surpass human capabilities, within the next 5 years or decade or whatever it is.
So I was going to ask you that. How long, I'm not asking for an exact number, but how long do you think it would take based on the technology we have now and the rate of improvement that we see where humans won't be needed?
I've always taken an approach of empowering human workers with technology. I've always found that works better. Anytime people go into it with the idea of replacing their workers as the primary goal, I find that they tend to not be successful. The projects tend to fail. When will we not need human workers? I mean, is this the Isaac Asimov future utopia where robots are doing all the work and humans are sitting in lounge chairs drinking mimosas? We tend to overestimate the short-term impact of technology, but we also tend to underestimate the long-term impact of technology. It's just the way it's played out. And I think that trend will probably continue. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there'll always be a need for humans. We are seeing more and more large automated systems that can store and retrieve things, for example, effectively, which in some sense is what a big warehouse is, right? So you will see warehouses where you put a pallet in one end of, that's coming from Head and Shoulders. And then out the other end, you get a pallet with all of the different things that a particular store needs, and there'll be no humans in the middle. That'll happen for sure. There are companies that already do that type of thing. But yeah, I don't know. More and more will have time to be more human, I think, which is the great thing. People shouldn't be spending their time driving forklifts, in my opinion. They don't do a good job of it. Run into racking. They knock over products and smash into things and hurt people. So these are jobs that are well suited for automation. But the what should we do piece is, I think, generally going to come from humans. When that piece no longer is done by humans, then I think we're in real trouble.
So not far from you in Fremont, California, I believe the Tesla factory is making, well, they have a goal to make 10,000 Optimus robots by the end of 2025. And Elon Musk admits that they might only make it halfway there, but he's fairly confident that each year they will 5x production, which would mean millions of robots every single year just from Tesla by the end of this decade, and perhaps billions if that trend continues into the next one. And there's about a dozen, if not more, highly advanced humanoid robot companies out there now. There might be more players in the market in the future. I'm curious, with your perspective, do you think this will be the case where humanoid robots may in fact outnumber significantly humans? And what does that look like when they start like self-replicating?
I guess I would say I'm skeptical, at least anytime within the, near decades. And that is that it's easy to build large numbers of humanoid robots, but what are those robots actually going to be doing that's providing value? Yeah, I think you're gonna see a peak to the humanoid hype, and then I think it's gonna subside. And then there'll probably be a second humanoid hype where it'll actually happen more for real. Would humanoids outnumber humans on the planet? I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I mean, you kind of look at the self-driving car industry as a prototype of this in a sense, right? There were so many predictions for the past several decades, actually, that self-driving cars were going to, take off and be everywhere. And yet today, there does not exist a single profitable self-driving car company. And so many have gone out of business. It turns out that human drivers are actually, one, really good, and two, really cheap. If you have all of these robots doing all of the work, what you're going to find is that there are going to be a lot of companies and a lot of people say, hey, we've got all these people who, let's just say for example, or for argument's sake, that, humanoids do put a lot of people out of work. Well, what's that going to do? Well, it's just going to make workers less expensive. And so the robots are going to have competition with humans. And there are going to be a lot of people going to say, I don't want to be driven by a robot. I don't want my dinner served by a robot. I want a real human. And there are going to be plenty of humans available to do that job, and they're going to do it in a cost-effective way. So I don't think it's going to be quite so straightforward as people tend to. The other problem is we tend to think of technology and jobs as sort of a zero-sum game. And what I mean by that is we tend to think that there's a set number of jobs in the world. You bring in technology to start doing a job, that puts somebody out of work. The fact of the matter is it doesn't work that way, not by a long shot. Let me give you one example. Years ago, in order to communicate with somebody who wasn't in the room with me, I needed to use a telephone. And that telephone was connected to other telephones through a switchboard. And that switchboard was operated by a switchboard operator. And so, I would pick up my phone, hello, and that would go into the headset of an operator somewhere. I got a little laser there. And then he or she would say, who do you want to be connected to? And I would tell them who I wanted to be connected to. And then they would literally take a plug and plug it into that person's, crank something to ring their bell, and then they would answer. So that's how it used to work. No electronics involved. This was like basically just wires and some basic amplifiers. Somebody says, I think we could do this way better. And they come up with this idea of the automatic switchboard, vacuum tubes, eventually transistors. There was this fear of, we're going to put all of these switchboard operators out of work. I think in the peak, there was maybe several hundred thousands, if, maybe got into the millions. First of all, nobody today is wishing they had a telephone operator job, right? I mean, I don't know anybody sitting there all day just plugging in wires, right? That's not a job a human wants to do. But I think the more interesting, and so the way it worked is that, people would retire out of that job and new people just wouldn't go in as the technology was adopted. But I think the far more interesting part of that story is that if we were to try to do today's communications using that technology, let's just say that, the switchboard operator union mounted a successful campaign to protect their jobs and, down with vacuum tubes, just like the original workers in the cloth factories put their wooden shoes in the looms, right? Sabotaged. Let's say for the sake of argument that they had done that. Well, to achieve today's communications using that technology, it would take many, 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 many times the population of the entire Earth, and it would still suck. And so if you think about the number of jobs that have been created by electronics, by computers, by the internet, by social media, this is one of the things, like just a little over a decade ago, like social media was barely a thing. And now I can't remember what the latest number was, but it's almost, I think it was like 25% of the workers are like somehow involved, their jobs somehow involve social media. The new jobs created, the new economy that evolves from the technology is just not something that we necessarily are good at predicting, right? So we think it's a zero-sum game. There are this many jobs. If we bring in automation, it's going to put this many people out of work. Never happens that way. Always creating more opportunities than we're taking away. And there is the jobless rate or the unemployment rate will go up, it will go down, it will go up. These are just the natural fluctuations. This has happened forever. And accelerating technology can certainly have an impact. We do need to be thoughtful. We need to think about providing training programs. We need to think about providing safety nets. But this idea of widespread technological unemployment, I think, is probably still overblown.
Especially when you throw in off-planet opportunities. Humanoids might do better there than our organic suits.
One of the first things I did in technology was worked on the Mars rover. It was called Rocky 7. It was the progenitor to Spirit and Opportunity. Yeah, robots are great for space.
Coming back to within the world of business, if you're an SMB, what are the things you need to take into consideration? If you were going to sum this up, the things you need to take into consideration when you're considering integrating AI or technology and automation into your business?
Well, I think it's mostly just about being very practical. You don't want to get sucked into the hype. You want to be very careful to make sure that what you're doing truly has a return on investment and is going to provide a superior experience for your customers. I can't tell you the number of AI marketing companies that have popped up. Probably thousands, probably hundreds of thousands. I don't know. Like, it seems like every third startup I talk to is an AI marketing. And I don't know how much marketing we can take. I mean, like, there's only so much marketing we can take. So I'd say just be very practical. Put people first. It's a big part of it. I think when you build a successful business, it's because you have figured out how to put people first. And, seek expert help, talk to people who know. I'm always happy to help. If somebody is interested in trying to differentiate smoke and mirrors from like real value, reach out. Happy to help. A lot of times people say, hey, could you just take a quick look at this? Is this for real? Should we believe in this? Because, yeah, there is a lot people selling stuff that they don't even really understand so well yet, or it hasn't really been deployed at a level where it's proven to actually work. And you don't really want to be the test case.
Where can people follow you or get in touch with you?
I'm mostly on LinkedIn. So I'm pretty easy to find, Daniel Theobald. Thankfully, there's not that many Daniel Theobalds on LinkedIn.
Well, thanks for talking with us, Daniel. It was really fascinating. I mean, obviously we could go on for hours, but perhaps we could do a part 2 later, see how things shake out this year.
Yeah. And just to wrap up again, I think my number one piece of advice is, no matter who you are, is take some time to really invest in your mental health. We've got a mental health crisis going on in this country, on the planet, and you don't have to suffer. There's a lot of stigma around mental health, and I think the big secret is everybody has mental health. Oftentimes we don't acknowledge that, right? You're not crazy or sane. You've got mental health and you're somewhere on this spectrum, and you should do a little something every day to invest in your mental health, and that'll have the biggest positive impact in your life. I won't tell you how to do it. There's lots of resources out there, but that will have the biggest positive impact on your life.
That's a great point. And I'd like to ask you actually one more question about that. Why do you think we have been so reticent to acknowledge that there is mental health, like you put it? Like, for example, if I was eating, expired food all day, it wouldn't surprise me that, like, oh, that's a bad thing. Like, I shouldn't do that, or I should go to a doctor or something like that. But like for the mental health, it's like, oh no, I'm totally fine. I'm not going to look at that at all.
Eating expired stuff mentally all day long, right? We do that to ourselves. Well, there's just a lot of stigma around it. And that stigma culturally has come from a number of different places. I think there was certainly some from the military. Like, you had to pass some psychological evaluation, and like you're either fit or unfit, right? And so you get this idea that you're either crazy or you're not crazy. Either you're a sane person or you're not a sane person. And it just doesn't work that way at all. It's embarrassing. Like, I break my leg. Oh yeah, I did a ski jump and it was awesome, but oh yeah, I broke my leg. Nobody's gonna feel upset about that. But like, oh, I like worked myself to death and I had a mental breakdown. Nobody wants to admit that, right? I don't know. And I think we need to be willing to admit that. I worked myself to death and I had a mental breakdown. It's out there. I'm okay. Right? It's all right to admit that you can, that we need to invest in ourselves emotionally. And life is too short to waste it doing meaningless stuff too. I mean, you think about the stuff we spend our time chasing, and is it really bringing us peace and happiness and joy, or whatever words? Yeah, I think that there's a real opportunity here. And let me say this, we actually have an opportunity to think about these things because of technology, right? It used to be that we had to spend our entire day trying to figure out how to produce the food that we needed to eat and shelter. And, meeting our basic needs, you go all the way back, through human history, was something that the vast majority of humanity had to spend their waking hours to achieve. And when you're in a survival mode, you don't really have the time to stop and think about, well, am I happy? Does my life feel meaningful?
It's interesting that as our lives have got easier, it seems to be that our mental health has got more difficult to manage or to navigate. And I wonder if with AI and technology getting ever more a part of our lives and freeing us up from certain things, if part of the problem that will come is our mental health will suffer more as we have more time to contemplate.
Yeah, I think that's right, but I think we'll see a bifurcation because while these tools give us more free time to watch YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and feel really bad about ourselves, right? Because look, all this media, all this stuff, all this advertising out there generally makes us feel bad about ourselves if we're honest about it. But at the same time, these tools actually offer us opportunities better than ever before to live the kind of lives that we should be living. And the difference is intention. The difference is, am I going to put effort into creating a path for myself that leads me to the place that I want to be? Or am I just going to get swept along with all the chat GPT bullshit that's feeding me, right? Am I just going to be a consumer? I'm consuming physical things, but more and more now we're consumers of kind of like high fructose corn syrup ideas. And I think we're seeing a little bit of a reaction to that, and I think people are realizing it's not making them happy. And yeah, so I think we'll figure it out. I think by and large we'll figure it out.
We tend to head in that direction. Like you said, we're good at problem solving. It's just a matter of kind of focusing on the problem.
Yeah, and communications, great podcasts like this are ways that you can get the message out. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, we appreciate you coming on. Thank you for the thought-provoking conversation.
Anytime, yeah.